She stood alone in the center of a platform, barefoot, her dress torn and stained with dirt and dry blood. Her hands cradled her swollen belly. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She simply stared forward, calm and unflinching, as alien voices echoed throughout the vast chamber above her. The council chambers were filled with delegates of a dozen species. They sat elevated, watching her like a zoo exhibit. None spoke with compassion, only disdain. A female, human, pregnant with an unknown entity's child. It was not just a scandal in their eyes. It was contamination. The prosecutor, draped in ceremonial armor, announced charges of cross-species violation, unauthorized reproduction, and planetary trespassing. They didn't care about justice. They wanted submission. The sentence was already decided. They just needed a show. General Varkan, supreme commander of the Kovorian defense conglomerate, stepped forward, towering and armored. His cobalt skin shimmered beneath the artificial lights. He was silent as he stared at the woman, assessing her like prey. "You refuse to speak the name of the Father," he said. His voice was deep, smooth, but soaked in venom. "It's not loyalty. It's fear. You know the disgrace you've brought." The woman didn't reply. Her fingers gripped the underside of her belly as though to shield her unborn child from the storm circling above her. Varkan took another step forward. "No, then allow me to pass judgment in his absence." His foot rose, armored and heavy. With one swift motion, he drove his boot into her stomach. She gasped, breathless, stumbling backward, arms instinctively wrapping around herself as she dropped to her knees. The entire chamber went quiet, not in concern, but in anticipation. A few sneered. Others seemed unsure, unsettled. She didn't scream. She didn't fall apart. She lifted her chin, blood on her lip, and looked up at Varkan with eyes that were terrifyingly calm. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. Varkan laughed. "And why is that, breeder?" She wiped her mouth. "Because now he's coming." No one spoke. The words fell heavy, even if most dismissed them instantly. But one among the observers shifted in his seat, recognizing the tone, not just of warning, but of certainty. The silence was broken by the shriek of a distant alarm. A council aide ran in, panicked, whispering something into the ear of a commander, who immediately stiffened. He tapped furiously at a tablet. No response. Then again, nothing. Emergency relays had gone dark. The woman remained on her knees, unmoving. Varkan scoffed and turned to the room. "Fear not. This is a bluff. These apes are clever with words, but that's all they have. Her mate is likely dead, or cowardly, or both." More alarms now. Flickering lights. A subtle vibration under the floor. The kind of mechanical hum that preceded power failure. Technicians scrambled. One spoke out loud without realizing. A single-man vessel breached the perimeter. No registration. No ID. Varkan's face hardened. "Send intercepts." No response from the fleet, the technician said. The woman stood, slowly, one hand on her side. "He told me not to say his name. That would only bring trouble." "What name?" Varkan growled. She looked at him, through him. "Jace Malric." The name scattered the chamber like a bolt of plasma. Delegates stood, whispered. A few gasped. One slumped into his seat, muttering something in his native tongue that translated to deathless. Varkan waved a hand. A myth, an exaggerated tale spun by cowards who fear their own failures. "He is a man, and men bleed like the rest." The technician again. "Sir, the station's AI is rejecting our override. Systems are being controlled externally, and there's a breach in the tribunal gate." Someone just. Then silence. The feed cut out. Every screen turned black. Then one flickered on. Static. Then an image. A single man walking calmly through an empty corridor, eyes forward, a matte black suit clinging to a body shaped by war. His face wasn't visible, only his gait. Calm, measured, unstoppable. One delegate stood and turned to Varkan. "You struck his mate." Another voice followed. "You struck a Terran's unborn." And another. "You've doomed us." Varkan's composure cracked, but he stood tall. "I do not fear one man." Behind him, the woman stood taller now, shoulders squared despite her pain. "You should," she said. Because you didn't just strike me. You declared war on the only thing he's ever cared about. She placed her hand gently over her stomach again. And he always keeps his promises. No one cheered. No one moved. They all just waited for the storm she promised. The war room aboard the orbital command station was chaos restrained by protocol. Alerts streamed in, silent breaches, system overrides, sensor ghosts. Every attempt to trace the origin failed. Ships dispatched to intercept never reported back. No wreckage, no signals, just absence. General Varkon stood at the center, flanked by his honor guard. His expression no longer mocked. It calculated. One vessel, human signature, no fleet behind it. Yet their network buckled under its approach. Across the console, a junior officer whispered, "He's here." Varkon turned sharply. "You know nothing." The officer didn't respond. The chamber knew the name now. Jace Maurik, rumored dead. Or worse, off the grid by choice. Human Special Reconnaissance Division, disavowed by the Terran Accord. His record classified, except for whispered stories from survivors. Those who watched enemies fall without hearing a shot. The data feed flickered again. The ship had landed, not with noise but silence. A complete bypass of every defensive layer. No weapons detected. No crew. Only atmosphere disturbance, indicating a single exit from the vessel. Still, no image of his face. Every camera shut down the moment he passed within range. One advisor finally said it. "This is a retrieval mission." Varkin's gaze narrowed. Not a raid. Not an attack. He's come for her. A single purpose, no interest in conquest. That was worse. A man who didn't care for war meant there'd be no negotiation. Across the sector, satellite arrays collapsed under data corruption. Comms between military outposts went dead. Security AI failed in sequence. It wasn't a virus. It was precision, control, not destruction. Whoever was doing this knew every weakness in their systems, every backdoor, every redundancy. A transport drone was found hovering in the hangar. No pilot, just a mark scorched into its shell, a single Terran character. The mark used by Earth's Phantom Unit, not recognized by official empires, but deeply feared in back-channel reports. Each time it appeared, something disappeared, an admiral, a base, a decision-maker. The woman, Alara, was returned to her cell after the tribunal. She remained silent. The guards assigned to her avoided her eyes. They'd heard too much. The way she'd spoken, the lack of fear. It wasn't pride. It was faith. Not blind belief, but certainty. She'd warned them. Now every second felt like a countdown to something they couldn't quantify. Elsewhere, in a data control hub, a technician tried rebooting the internal network. It refused. The screen displayed only a line of text. "You took what was mine." In the armory, security doors sealed themselves. Units found their exosuits frozen, guns unresponsive. Nothing could be activated without remote permission, and none of them had anymore. Delegates of the council demanded protection. Varkon told them the threat was exaggerated. But his voice wavered now. His assurances felt hollow. Each word chased by a dread even his ego couldn't suppress. An ambassador from the Nearth Coalition approached him privately. "You don't understand what you've done. That man didn't serve Earth. He left it." Varkon sneered. "He's still human." "Yes," the Nearth said. "That's what terrifies us." The galaxy knew war, knew cruelty. But humans, when they fought for ideas, they were dangerous. When they fought for family, they were unstoppable. All systems tracking the entity now focused on one signal. A heartbeat. Not Jace's, but Alara's. Somehow, her vitals were linked to his presence. No biometrics sent from her end. Yet when her stress rose, lights flickered. When her pulse dropped, doors opened. Something connected them beyond code. She was the key. He was the response. Then came the first casualty. A squad guarding the primary hallway vanished. Not killed, gone. Their trackers pinged once, then cut off. Later, their weapons were found neatly stacked at the hallway's end. Their armor untouched. No wounds. Just unconscious bodies laid down like they'd fallen asleep. It wasn't a fight. It was a message. The path toward the cell block now stood open. Not forced. Not broken, just permitted. Varkon called for reinforcements from the planetary fleet. No reply. A deep systems engineer broke silence. He's in our systems. Every layer. Every breath we take here, he knows it. The general barked back. Then find him. The engineer replied without looking up. He already found us. One final attempt was made. The corridor was flooded with vapor deterrents. Gravity reversed. Sound cannons activated. Nothing. A camera picked up movement again. Jace Maurik, still faceless on the feed, walked slowly through the corridor. Every weapon pointed at him failed. Systems overloaded as he passed. Even the emergency override panels collapsed in flames before guards could reach them. The feed flickered once more, then displayed a live biometric overlay of Varkon himself, and a line beneath it. You have one life left. The general didn't move. He couldn't. The sound of his footsteps reached before his form. Measured, unhurried. Each step echoed with intent. No blaring alarms now, no frantic scrambling. Silence had returned, not from resolution, but resignation. He wasn't storming a fortress. He was walking through an open door. Jace Maurik entered the core tribunal chamber without resistance. There were guards. There were weapons. None were used. They stood frozen, not by command, but by something older, instinct. Some dropped their rifles. A few turned and walked away, not out of fear, out of understanding. They knew they weren't part of this equation anymore. He didn't speak. His face remained partially obscured under the hood of his recon-grade armor, the Terran insignia barely visible. A legend that no one could verify, but whose results they had seen. Wars turned without fleet movement. Regimes collapsed without bloodshed. One name whispered after the fact, Maurik. He approached the platform where Varkon stood. The general, larger and more imposing, clenched his fists. His voice cracked only once before finding its rhythm. You break into my tribunal, disable my fleets, hijack my systems for a woman. Jace said nothing. Varkon raised his voice. You believe this is justice? She was in violation of Galactic law. Unauthorized offspring. Interference in hybrid-class sovereignty. She was warned. Still, no reply. Then Varkon drew his sidearm. Not ceremonial, military grade, charged. He aimed without flourish. She chose to disobey. I gave her every chance. Jace stepped forward, slow and direct. The shot fired. It never landed. A soft pulse shimmered around Jace's chest plate. The projectile fragmented midair. Some kind of field, but not visible until used. He didn't slow, didn't react, just walked. Calm as gravity, unstoppable as time. Varkon fired again. The pulse consumed the shot. Then the weapon itself sparked and melted in his hand. He dropped it, staring. Jace was 2 meters away now. She's human, Varkon snapped. You protect a traitor. Only then did Jace speak. She is my wife. The voice was low, controlled, stripped of emotion, but heavier than anything that had filled the chamber. No anger, no threats, just truth. She was taken, caged, assaulted, and you thought there would be no answer. His hand moved to the side of his neck. A soft click. The chamber's screens activated, this time not corrupted, but deliberate. Footage displayed the tribunal. Varkon's attack, the strike, the audience, the silence. Now it played for every system within 10 light years. Broadcast across diplomatic lines. Unfiltered, unedited, raw. You judged her, Jace continued, without knowing what that meant. Delegates murmured. Some rose in protest. Others remained seated, still absorbing the weight. This was no longer about power. It was exposure. Proof. The kind no empire survives. Jace walked past Varkon and unlocked Alara's restraints. She stepped down, visibly injured but upright. He placed a hand on her back. No words passed between them. Varkon turned, rage overtaking reason. You believe this makes you untouchable? You think you've won? Jace turned back. No, I didn't come here to win. I came to end it. Varkon lunged. He didn't make it 2 steps. Jace moved once. Nothing flashy, nothing unnecessary. Just a shift in weight and movement too fast for the eye to track. Varkon collapsed, groaning, limbs spasming. His nervous system overridden. Not killed, just switched off. Jace crouched beside him. "You'll live," he said, "long enough to feel what it's like to be powerless. That's more mercy than you deserve." He stood and turned to the delegates. "Let this echo, not as threat, not as declaration, but as a reminder." He looked to Alara again, then addressed them one last time. "There are forces you understand. Fleets, laws, weapons. But you forgot the oldest one." He placed her hand in his. She gripped it firmly. "You forgot what happens when a human is given something to protect." No ceremony followed. No parade. No victory speech. Just silence. And a door left open behind him. The aftermath didn't begin with celebration. It began with stillness. Delegates who had once raised their voices in condemnation now sat in silence. Not out of fear, but recognition. They had witnessed something ancient in its simplicity. Not a war, not a conquest, a reckoning. Jace stood before the governing terminal. With a few commands, he extracted the tribunal logs, encrypted files, classified communications, everything connected to Alara's abduction and trial. They weren't hidden behind security. He didn't need a break-in. The systems responded to his presence, as though they'd been waiting for a rightful user. Authority wasn't claimed. It was assumed. He transmitted the files across open networks. Not to threaten, not to blackmail, just to show the truth. Alara, standing beside him, didn't ask for vengeance. She didn't ask for justice. She had already received what mattered. Not retribution, restoration. They had tried to erase her dignity. He gave it back without a single word of apology from them. Varkon, now restrained by his own forces, no longer following orders, only laws, refused to speak. Not out of defiance, but because he understood that no words could shift what had been done. He was not executed. He was imprisoned under his own statutes, judged by the system he once controlled. That was the final blow. Power stripped not by force, but by exposure. Jace walked through the halls with Alara at his side. Doors opened not through access cards or codes, but because no one dared to bar their passage. Those who once called humans primitive now looked away. They reached the hangar. His vessel awaited, still, pristine, untouched by the chaos around it. A machine built not for battle, but for return. It bore no insignia, but her name, etched quietly along the hull. Proof this mission had always been personal. Alara paused and looked back once, not with resentment, but clarity. She had survived worse than judgment. What stood behind her now wasn't a courtroom. It was a monument to their failure to understand love. A voice over comms finally crackled through Terran command. They hadn't heard from Jace in over 2 years. They asked if extraction was needed. He gave no answer. Just shut off the channel. This wasn't for Earth. It never had been. Inside the ship, the interior lights adjusted to their vitals. Everything was calm. No alerts. No threats. Just quiet anticipation of departure. She sat beside him, resting her hand over her stomach again. The pulse was steady. The child had survived, not because of medicine or miracle, but because she had believed. Jace looked forward, eyes distant but aware. The galaxy hadn't changed. It still judged, still punished, still sought to divide. But it now remembered something it had long tried to forget. Humans don't fight for dominance. They fight for what's theirs. As the ship lifted, sensors across the system registered the energy shift. Power resumed. Defense systems re-engaged. The disruption ended the moment he left, as if the universe itself had held its breath until he was done. Messages flooded from across the quadrant. Apologies. Condemnations of Varkon. Emergency summits. All too late. The truth didn't need their spin. It had already spread. Back on Earth, people would hear the story. Some wouldn't believe it. Others would nod, saying, "That sounds like something we do." Because it wasn't about advanced tech or strategy. It was about response. Someone crossed a line they never should have. A child would be born who'd never see the courtroom where it began. But they'd grow up knowing their father crossed half the galaxy, disabled fleets, rewrote the reputation of an empire, not to conquer, but to carry them home. That truth would outlive the names of the judges, outlast the fear. In the dark, cold silence of space, some things shine brighter than stars. Like a promise made, a line drawn, And the answer given when someone forgets what humans are capable of when you make it personal. He didn't come to fight. He came to remind them, don't touch what's his.